All right, come on in. It's dimmed a little bit. A little nighttime vibe, right? Whoa. Greetings, welcome, come on in. Thank you for stopping by. Those of you who are coming in pure love and light and divine energy, welcome. Thank you. Okay, this is Bloom Forth in Love, nighttime, evening editions, discussions. As you're coming in, I believe the title says something like Cinderella. And I know I have the comments off, and that's only because I'm not interested in entertaining karmics. But to those of you who are coming in love and light, I appreciate you. So it's not meant to offend you all, but sometimes I go back and forth. When I don't feel like playing with people, trying to be special and deep, I'll cut off the comments like, nope, not today. So this is going to be me sharing something that I think I've talked about over the years. I even started a book on this, and I just never finished it. This was years ago. And it was about Cinderella. It was like a parallel to the fairy tale stories, the Disney stories about Cinderella. Okay? And ironically enough, collective, for those of you that this resonates with, it's similar. You may have been Cinderella, even if you're a man. Okay, you may have been the Manrella version, bitch, okay, in a scenario. But Cinderella, okay, of course there's modifications because sometimes it's not the stepmother, sometimes it's your natural mother. Now, and sometimes it's not stepsisters, it's natural sisters or brothers, okay? In this story, you know, we see this play out in real life, whether people want to admit this or not. People may look at these types of stories and they go, fairy tales, this is Disneyland, yada, yada. But though that's to the non-discerning eye. But people who are deep thinkers and know how to look beyond the veil and face value of things, they know full well that this type of stuff actually does go on. So Cinderella, you know, was just this, you know, young girl, and her father passed away, and whatever was left to the stepmother, and technically her. But the stepmother was power hungry and money hungry and had issues, okay? Jealous of Cinderella, as were her two stepsisters. And I want to talk about the dangers of why this actually plays out more common than people want to believe. In the case of Cinderella, her stepmother and the stepsisters, what's the issue? If we were to kind of like de-woo-woo it and demystify it and bring it to practical, true to life, real life situations, what's the issue? What is their issue with Cinderella? What's going on with them? What's the real truth? It's jealousy. And this is why it is said that jealousy is as strong as the grave. Jealousy, unchecked, undealt with, and unhealed souls and individuals gets progressive to where it will drive them to do some very unsavory things behind the scene. Cinderella did nothing to these individuals but exist. Her existence bothered them. Period. They could not feel better about themselves unless they were trying to humiliate her and push her down. That was the only way they could find relief from their depraved minds, was if they were to make her forced to harsh labor and scrubbing toilets and floors while they go to the ball, right? Why they try to beat her, why they try to emulate her life. The only way they could feel better was to try to minimize her, try to plane her down, try to keep her squelched, try to keep her secluded, isolated, and serving their whims. People that operate in that form of jealousy do the same thing today. They may cover it. They may be professional at that. In the story of Cinderella, the stepmother as well as the stepsisters, they covered it. The only person that actually saw the ugly was Cinderella. But to the world, they went out and they presented in a certain way. Cinderella's stepsisters wanted to be wanted by the prince. So they tried to imitate her. They tried to fit their foot in her glass slipper. They did everything. The stepmom tried to push the stepsisters off onto the prince. What was all that about? What is it about today? The same thing has always been. Whether people want to admit this or not, it's the same. It's always been about money, stat, clout, fame, notoriety, at any cost. Some would say, well, what was their issue with Cinderella, though? Sure, people do strive at any cost, materialistic, okay, sure, but what was their personal hang-up with her, though? Why the problem with her? Especially if, since she was innocent or she wasn't striving the same way in which they were. So what was their problem? That's just it. They saw something in Cinderella in which they didn't see in themselves, and that bothered them. Her existence bothered them. No matter how plain she was, when she was on the floor scrubbing the floor with a toothbrush, her presence still bothered them. Because it's their soul that was the issue. Her purity, her light, her natural, whatever it was about her that emanated from her bothered them. And they took it out on her. She had done nothing to them, but they took that out on her. They needed her to feel small, like the poem that I created. They needed her to feel small so that they could feel tall. So they wanted her in harsh conditions. They wanted her minimized while they capitalized and benefited off of what was actually hers. This goes on today. This is why people say it's dangerous to become close friends with those who have a major issue with jealousy. Because there's no telling what they do. These are the type of people that would be smiling at you, but secretly trying to sabotage you at the same time. I've been saying this for a while. Not everything is quite as it seems. Not everyone is who you actually think they are. When people have allowed their insecurity and jealousy to overrun their lives and cause them to do some pretty heinous things, they kind of turn over their soul. So though you may see the physical form of someone as you recall them, it ain't there. And here's why I say this. When you guys think about this from a practical place, this is going to help you. When you think of it from a practical place, you will realize that if individuals were who you still thought they were, there would be no way they could pull off some of the things that some of these individuals have done. Meaning the inhumane acts that some of you find out about. There's no way. No way. That is an indication to you that someone probably checked out a long time ago. Now, in Cinderella's case, or a situation very similar, whether this is the real mother or the real father, if you want to go on the parental aspect side of it, I believe that in some of our cases, some of our parents, if they are indeed karmics, and they reneged their own healing journey and they got caught up in the hype and got connected to the wrong people, okay, whether they went to states and hooked up with people who did dark things and basically sold themselves out then. They sold their soul then, attempting to sacrifice any light ones that's in their own bloodline. They already checked out, so they could have checked out while you were young, okay, while you were a baby and an infant. Yes. So unfortunately, the person that you came to know as your birther is not quite who you think they are. Why am I comfortable saying that? Well, because there's no way that if they were who you thought they were, they would have been able to, with a straight face and without blinking or conscious, do some of the things in which they've done. What happens, with some of us, with, whether it's the stepsisters, the stepbrothers, or whatever, over time, it depends. It's the same story, though. When people refuse their own healing journey, and when they refuse to look at themselves, time goes by. The economics of the world changes, the economy. All that stuff only brings out what's already inside of people. So, unfortunately, people get caught up and they sell their soul. They want, some people covet and want fame and notoriety that bad. And it's because they don't realize that this is because of the whole of their soul. If they would have dealt with all those things when their team, however y'all want to resonate, source, over time was trying to assist them on their own perspective paths, they just wanted the shortcut. They wanted to feel good. They wanted, they didn't want to deal with any of that. And these things are progressive. So refusal is not going to make you get better over time because you refuse. You're going to become worse. And Cinderella, in the case of Cinderella, her existence bothers these people. Her shine, her light, her creations. And so what does one do then? You attempt to what? Kill. unaliving. You attempt to what? Get them taken down. And I'm going to say this again. If the people were who you thought they were, if they were who you really thought they were, there's no way they would have done it. There's no way. I'm sorry. I don't care what nobody say. There's no way they would have done it. The heinous things that some of you all went through, as well as myself, if they were still the natural person, the natural human that you remember, they would not have been able to attempt to kill you. They would not have been able to do any type of death ritual. They would not have been able to get your kids assaulted with a straight conscience and face if they were human. Individuals get overtaken by their choices and the energies in which they play with. Needing to win at all costs, that's an illness. That's not a flex and that's not a strength when it goes to this kind of extent. Where people attempt to steal other people's identity, destiny, purpose, willing to try to sacrifice off somebody in secret, by the way, because these types of people, like I said with Cinderella and the stepmother and the stepsisters, chances are to the public I bet you they didn't look like nothing how they was treating Cinderella behind closed doors. I bet. They probably looked like these royal, upstanding citizens of that particular society. So when you all hear people, collective, I would caution assumption and judgment. Because just because you didn't see it, don't mean it didn't happen. Just because you and your belief system don't give you space to understand that, don't mean it ain't so. Cinderella, as well as you all, if you are High Vibe Collective, in these stories, in these kind of scenarios, have 100% every right to defend their life and their children's life. They have every right to speak out. They have every right to be angry at the injustices. They have every right to call out bullshit. If they have been violated, whether you all can wrap your head around it or not, they have every right to speak out about that. Whether you want to believe it or not. The world probably did not know what Cinderella, since we're using it as a parallel or a parable, did not know what Cinderella went through behind closed doors. Why? Because those individuals were professional at what? Hiding it. Covering it up. See, I've been talking for a long time about, as a collective race, needing to get to a place where we're just not so surface. Because people can stamp on a religion, a spirituality, an outfit, and, you know, play all the roles, contribute to all of the charities, and whatever necessary to look the part. And people swallow it. But that is ultimately the best disguise. See, the situation with Cinderella and the stepmom and the stepsisters, in that story, we would probably call them sociopaths, because they liked, their issue was notoriety and appearance. So they did need to put on a certain air. But behind the closed doors, everything off about them was projected on to Cinderella. The one that reminded them, without her knowing it, or without her even trying to, but the one that reminded them about what they were not. And it ain't because they couldn't be. It's because they've chosen to not cultivate a decent soul within themselves. They've chosen to be toxic. And what we choose over and over again, we eventually morph into that. They chose to have double lives, where for the public arena, they appear like these royal, beautiful individual souls, but in their true lives, their real lives, and behind the scene, and their conduct to Cinderella was anything but that. And then these are the same types, just like I'm sure with the Cinderella story, you know, when it all comes crumbling down, eventually, even if it takes 40 years. Collective, the hardest thing that you all probably have had to get to, and I talked about this over a year ago, is when you have to come to realize your families are karmics. The hardest thing you'll probably swallow, the hardest thing you'll come to realize, like how far some of them went, coming to realize that some of them sold their own soul, and then they tried to sacrifice you off and your children. Who wants to believe that, right? Nobody. Nobody wakes up and just be like, oh yeah, sure. yeah. That's not the first go-to for nobody. But just because, see, the lessons are, just because it's something hard to believe, don't mean it ain't so, though. Just because it's not something that maybe you would necessarily do, so you and your framework can't fathom it, doesn't mean that there aren't individuals that do. And the people that have been on the receiving end, the Cinderellas of the story, will be vindicated. The innocent lives, the innocent children that have been affected by these types of people will be vindicated. These are usually individuals that do not want change. They don't. They just want the glitz, the glam. They want the look of hashtag woke without being woke. Hashtag spiritual, hashtag saved, hashtag whatever you want to call it, without actually being anything like it. Because their behind the scene conduct proves differently. Their secrets. Jealousy is a dangerous thing to play with. If you know there are individuals that are like that, I wouldn't recommend being a BFF or trusting them much. Because they will always be trying to secretly compete with you and secretly sabotage you with a smile on their face while they hand you a cupcake. You know what I find fascinating too, collective, and you guys are going to probably laugh at this too, because you've probably already heard this somewhere else. You know how people, humans, we have a lot of excuses, don't we? For everything under the sun, man. We're on our period. We're this. I mean, I'm just thinking about all the excuses we have ever used to justify fucked up behavior. All stressed on my period. Midlife crises. Perimenopause. Menopause. Now, I'm not saying these things aren't, they don't exist, but I'm about to say something that's going to make you go, So answer the question to yourself, even though these things have some form of validity, yes. But why is it that these same individuals with the same exact scenarios, if you were to put them in front of their boss, whoever they admire, the pastor, the preacher, the prayer lady, or just anybody that they admire or trying to impress, why is it that all of a sudden all of these hormones come into submission? Why is it that everything that seemed to be so out of control and the excuses that are being used for behind the scene when it comes to being in front of the boss or at work or being over there and over there, these hormones they're not bothered when they're in those situations. It's only an issue when it's at home or behind the scene. Why is this? Because a part of it is bullshit. Because the very fact that someone could control their behavior is an indication that they do have control over their faculties. The very fact that they can shift and change gears if they need to, if they're standing in front of pastor so-and-so and the prayer lady and the Reiki person and the boss man and the supervisor, whoever it is, the fact that they can suddenly hone it in what seems to be so volatile and out of control behind the closed doors because they're on their cycle and they're stressed out, or there's a midlife crisis, or their parent, whatever. All of a sudden, there's control. Why? Because a lot of what we have said or what we have heard in these situations are just that, excuses to be toxic and excuses to not have to mind one's conduct and how you're treating people closest to you. Because they love you and they're not going nowhere, right? Or they're nobody special. But when it's someone special, because it's that check, you're trying to get that check. You know what I'm saying? Or you're trying to get that ink, whatever that payoff is. that acceptance, that way to go, that whatever it is. Now all of a sudden, control. Hormones and all, midlife crisis and all of a sudden it's pulled in. Why? How come they can't do this at home behind the closed doors? I'm sharing all these things just to hopefully help some of you out there that are healing and awakening and liberating yourself and starting to really look at things for what they are, to help you to think like, wait a minute, that's kind of true. Because how come they know how they got to act right when they in front of all these people, but then all of a sudden behind closed doors, oh my God, they're so hormonal, it's just all out of control now. What is that? See, until we decide for ourselves to wake up and challenge and question everything that we think we know, we'll stay blind and continue to make excuses for this type of stuff. But I'm going to say this for the record. The Cinderellas of these stories, the Cinderellas, Minderella, because if it's a man, right, and their children and so forth, will be vindicated. But it's when the Cinderellas and the Minderellas, right, decide to stand up and take their power back, defending themselves as you have a right to do. Don't believe the hype. People want to come out of the woodworks and have a whole lot to say that wasn't there or part of the shit. Okay? And they have their own attitudes and beliefs about things. But at the end of the day, I promise you, collective, each and every one of these same individuals will defend their right and their children's right. They will stand up and they will defend. And they will not take no shit for nobody. If people were coming for them and theirs and doing weird nigga bitch shit on them and theirs, I can bet you the bottom dollar that they were fucking, they ain't finna sit down and they ain't finna take it. They ain't gonna lay down and take it. They not gonna just lay down and let it happen. They not gonna just, no. They will stand up and do something about it, and you all have the right to do it, as well as any other Cinderellas, Minderellas in the story, because this is when justice starts to finally eventually play out. The Cinderella stepmothers and stepsisters of these parables and scenarios are not well. People that need to torture people, that should be your clue. Okay? People that do that type of stuff and project that kind of energy, I don't care if they're hiding it from the pastor and the preacher and the prayer lady and you know who they are and they know who they are. People who do that type of stuff, they're not who people think they are, and they're not well. Justice will be served.